Welcome to the world according to Rowan Dean.
Good evening and welcome to the world according to Rowan Dean, a world in which anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are not of equal moral value. More about that in a tick. We've got a huge show coming up this evening and you do not want to miss 1 second of it, including the curious case of Jason Arday, a superhuman athlete or just another academic diversity and inclusion pick gone wrong. And now you can train for the climate apocalypse in your sauna. Plus, Kevin Rudd, of all people, says Pauline Hanson isn't fit to be Australia's Prime Minister. Well, he should know. But first, you want my opinion? The Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism turns out to be itself anti-Semitic. Yep. This week, the Royal Commissioner permitted and indeed enabled an act of what, in my opinion, is pure, unadulterated anti-Semitism of the oldest kind in the book. I'll explain why in a second. But first, a quick lesson in left-wing moral relativism and when and where it is allowed to apply. According to the modern left, if a woman accuses a man of sexually harassing her, it is wrong to then suggest perhaps she was wearing a provocative dress or behaving in a provocative fashion on the dance floor. This is called slut-shaming and is a mortal offence. According to the modern left, if a black man gets punched in the face and you point out he was yelling insults at the other person's wife, this is called victim blaming. Both slut-shaming and victim blaming are unacceptable to the modern leftist mindset. Except, of course, when it comes to Israel and the Jews. No matter what happens to the Jews, they get spat on, punched, their homes vandalised, their synagogues burnt, whatever. Who is to blame? Why, the Jews themselves, of course. They were asking for it.
When you run out of luck and your life really sucks, just blame the Jews.
Lost your keys, missed the train, stub your toe in the rain.
Just blame the Jews.
Yes, just blame the Jews. The hypocrisy and moral relativism of the modern left is sickening. The Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism descended into farce this week, with the Jews, in essence, being blamed for being threatened and potentially attacked. Well, you deserve it. Appeared to be the field the Royal Commission preferred to allow to play out. Rather than exploring the overt anti-Semitism rife within some of the teachings and aspects of the religion of Islam itself, the Royal Commissioner instead chose to allow spurious justifications to be aired to account for what we at The Spectator Australia described as the pogrom at the Opera House. Because make no mistake, when you have an angry crowd chanting, "Where's the Jews?" history teaches us there is only one outcome. By the way, here is an eyewitness account from Mark Leach, the pro-Israeli Christian pastor, who was there that night.
I was chased out of the square by a bunch of young men wrapped in keffiyehs, threatening to slit my throat, running after me, making this gesture. I ended up hiding behind a police van. It is what struck me was that event had all the hallmarks of a pogrom.
And may I remind viewers of this disgusting incident only 24 hours earlier, on the very night of the murder, rapes, beheadings, kidnappings and torture of 1,200 Jews on October 7th at the Nova Festival. This depraved celebration took place.
I'm smiling. I'm smiling and I'm happy. I'm elated. It's a day of courage. It's a day of happiness. It's a day of pride. It's a day of victory. This is the day we've been waiting for.
This week at the Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism, Royal Commissioner Virginia Bell permitted nothing more, in my opinion, than good old-fashioned Jewish victim blaming. Blame Israel for the attacks upon the Jews. For over 40 minutes, David Ossip of the Jewish community had to endure idiotic questioning from the representatives of the pro-Palestinian organisations attempting to distract from and justify the depraved and self-evidently sinister actions of pro-Palestinian protesters at the Sydney Opera House on October 9th, 2023.
Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews?
The definition of anti-Semitism is holding Jews and/or Israel to a different standard to anybody else. That is precisely what happened this week at the Royal Commission into anti-Semitism, in my opinion. The door was opened for Israel, not anti-Semitism, to be held responsible for the threats and attacks upon Jews themselves. And worse, those representing the pro-Palestinian groups were given free rein to effectively justify the vile actions of the attackers by blaming the legitimate self-defense actions of the Israeli government. Just blame the Jews.
When you run out of luck and your life resucks, just blame the Jews.
Or the weather's too hot or your coffee's not.
Just blame the Jews.
Commissioner Bell also allowed the concept of Islamophobia to enter the proceedings. This is, in my opinion, the left's ultimate perverse moral relativism, where ancient and irrational loathing of Jews is put on the same moral equivalence as criticism of anything to do with the extremes of Islam. So, shall we see the pro-Palestinian crowd being cross-examined as to why non-Muslims might be afraid of Islam, which is literally what Islamophobia means? Of course not. There was recently an amazing debate at Oxford University, and the motion being debated was whether the West is right to be suspicious about Islam. Jonathan Sacerdoti gave a brilliant speech, and he is coming on the show shortly from London. But the answer to the question was brilliantly illustrated with a superb stunt by my old buddy Lawrence Fox, the actor and now political activist.
And the motion, this House believes the West is right to be suspicious of Islam. And then I started thinking about a cartoon that I have here in this envelope. It's a cartoon which I think it instills in me feelings much, much more worrying than suspicion. But, you know, in the spirit of consultation, I'll just leave it here for the moment, if we're okay with that.
Lawrence Fox then spoke at length about various aspects of Islam before, towards the end of his allotted time, returning to the aforementioned cartoon in an envelope.
So here we are with this cartoon, right? And it's time to show that I will not submit. I will not adhere to the religious laws of far-off places. Now, my wife asked me not to show this for fear of repercussions in my family, but I told her that if I did not, then I had already submitted to Islam.
You could feel the electricity, the fear, the horror, even in that room. At which point, various members of the debating union and the opposing side leapt to their feet, with one, Jacob Rees-Mogg, insisting that props surely are not allowed. But finally, Lawrence Fox did open the envelope.
So it is in that spirit that I will not submit that I show you this as an Englishman who believes in free speech.
The relief, proving beyond a shadow of doubt that the West has plenty of reasons to be suspicious of the extremes of Islam. Well, the ABC boss, Hugh Marks, has now apologised to Gina Rinehart for that disgusting video. Too little, too late. Heads must roll, and I hope Rinehart pursues her legal action and takes the head honchos at the ABC to the cleaners. What the ABC did was depraved. There's no other word for it. In my opinion, the ABC have clearly forfeited the right to taxpayers' money. They have shown their true colours. They want to make sexually violent pornographic comedy. That's great. I'm sure they'll get lots of subscribers. But the head of the ABC must now either say A, We are switching to a subscription model because we believe sexually explicit, violent, sadistic, pornographic satire is the way of the future, or B, he must resign. Full stop. Let's bring in my panel, former Labor MP Michael Danby and former Liberal Senator Holly Hughes. Great to see you both. Michael, is the ABC apology, is it enough?
They're irredeemable, Marx and Williams. It's Tingle, Milligan, Salek Sara, Carvelis and John Lyons, the Soviet that really runs the ABC. They're irredeemable. 40 years ago, Bob Hawke blew up when the ABC had every night an Iraqi apologist on. Kim Beazley established the predecessor to the Ombudsman's office, and nothing has changed. The same Ombudsman who came out with that idiotic statement saying it was within their guidelines to have that terrible attack on Mrs. Reinhardt. So they've got to go to a subscription service, but it's not going to happen unless there's a change of government. So I regret that very few people in the Labor Party seem to realise what a terrible, biased, far-left outfit they are. They should change their name from ABC to DSA.
Democrat Socialist, I love it, of Australia.
Democratic Social of Australia.
I love it, Michael. Holly, your boss, Pauline Hanson, you're now with One Nation. Holly, Pauline Hanson has, rightly in my opinion, banned the ABC. Why would you want these sexual pornographers anywhere near your press conference, in my opinion? What's yours?
Well, the fact of the matter is, if this was within their guidelines, then their guidelines need to change. But the reality is, it is only Pauline Hanson and One Nation who are looking to defund the ABC and SBS and turn it into a subscription model. We pay for a subscription to watch News24. Why should I also have to pay through my taxes a subscription to the ABC that just elevates my blood pressure every time I have to turn it on? It's just obscene that they think this is in any way acceptable. But unfortunately, having sat in Liberal Party rooms, the appetite for defunding the ABC is just simply not there when it comes to whoever is appointed into Cabinet and the communications ministerial position. It's just obscene that the last government didn't take the opportunity to do it when their coverage is so completely biased and has been for decades. They are so outside their charter, it's just become a joke and an absolute affront to Australian taxpayers.
Well, I hope if, who knows what's going to happen at the next election, but if Pauline Hanson does have the power to force the Liberal Party or give the Liberal Party government, I hope her first demand is that the ABC is immediately and instantaneously defunded and put on a subscription model. Michael, this Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism, I was just saying, I mean, I thought it was a disgrace, the behaviour we saw this week. In my opinion, allowing the Palestinian lawyers to quiz David Ossip for 40-odd minutes about the horrific event that at the Spectator Australia, we dubbed it the pogrom at the Opera House. Allowing this weird kind of, so it wasn't really, you know, was the Israeli government suddenly somehow to blame for that vile, disgusting Opera House scene. Michael, what did you make of the Royal Commission this week? In my opinion, it itself could be accused of anti-Semitism.
Well, very legalist. I think the Commissioner has turned out to be better than people's worst fears, but that's a low bar. And many Jewish people who've gone before it have appreciated the opportunity to vent their terrible stories and history the last 2.5 years, but that's not good enough. I think it's early closure by Albo is designed to avoid reporting at the same time as an election, and the fact that it's got limited terms of reference and is without Mr. Richardson is out of the script of Yes, Prime Minister. Never appoint an inquiry whose result you don't know.
Holly, your thoughts? Am I being too harsh on the Royal Commissioner? I was just appalled. I think allowing those pro-Palestinian activists to start banging on about, you know, what time a bomb dropped or a plane flew or whatever. We're talking about a demonstration that took place only hours after Israel was mourning the horrific 1,200 deaths of the Nova atrocities of October 7th, and they're banging on about this other stuff. Holly.
Oh, it was a desecration of one of our national symbols. It was absolutely disgusting and appalling. And the fact that Jewish Australians were told to stay out of the CBD while these rubbish were allowed to protest on the steps of the Opera House and say what they did is just absolutely disgraceful. And don't forget, Chris Minns was one of the few leaders that refused to light up the Opera House in solidarity with I'm trying to think the name of the twins with the red hair, or the two kids.
The Bibas twins.
Bibas twins, the Bibas children, sorry. But, Chris Minns refused to light up the Opera House when so many other buildings were lit up around the world to mark, their death and acknowledge what occurred happening to them. But it was nothing short of an ambush that happened to David Ossip at the Royal Commission. He was given no notice of what was coming, and he was fundamentally blamed for the actions that they perceived had occurred from the Israeli government. He has no oversight for that. That was just an absolute smokescreen and diversion tactic. And I think the Royal Commissioner really let herself down by letting that to occur. And where are the Labor ministers, by the way? Why aren't they fronting up to the Commission?
Good question. Michael, where are the Labor ministers? Why aren't they
Well,
there?
that's a very good point. The government and its decisions ought to be part of this Royal Commission. I don't know whether there's an arrangement with the Royal Commissioner for not to investigate the government, but I'll give you one thing it should investigate. Tony Burke openly made a decision in August of 2025 not to take the advice of the Director General of ASIO that they should upgrade security and that Jewish targets were the main targets in Australia. Why did he take that decision? He should be examined by the government about that, and that will be the crucial finding if it was to be made. And my strong feeling is that there's just going to be a lot of legal venting and a diversion of good intention of all of the people who appear before it and no real result that will change events in Australia. That's what we need, change, so this doesn't happen again.
Michael Danby, Holly Hughes, thanks so much for coming on the show. Now it's time for The World's Gone Mad. Yes, it truly is a world gone mad, where yet another individual at the top levels of one of the most prestigious universities in the world turns out to be a fabulator. Welcome to the curious case of Jason Arday, a story that involves mysterious pig's heads, time travel, superhuman feats of sporting prowess, and a highly imaginative CV. Jason Arday was born to Ghanaian migrant parents and grew up in a council estate in South London. That much we do know is true. Also that he was diagnosed with autism and didn't say his first word until he was 11 and couldn't read and write till he was 18. After receiving a PhD from Liverpool John Moores University, Arday rocketed up the academic ladder as a scholar of racism, education and inequality. And by 2023, at the age of 37, Jason Arday became the youngest black full professor and one of the youngest persons of any race to ever hold a chair professorship at Oxford or Cambridge. Impressive. But this past week, it has all gone strangely awry. And according to Andrew Doyle, quote, with each passing day, new revelations of his slippery relationship with reality seem to be emerging, end of quote. Indeed, in recent days, Arday has been likened to Don Quixote, Walter Mitty and Finchy from The Office. The first accusations involved plagiarism, of course, but then things started getting weirder. It was revealed Jason had claimed to have participated as a child in the famous TV series 7 Up, which is a tad tricky because it was filmed 2 decades before he was born. Other questionable claims or confabulations include boasting of running 30 marathons in 35 days, 9 of them with a fractured leg, and covering 600 miles in 6 days, a feat that would, if true, put him in the absolute elite of endurance athletes. He's also alleged to have exaggerated raising millions of pounds in charity, and there are odd claims about a mysterious severed pig's head being sent to his family from the local butcher's shop, which the local police and indeed the local butcher himself appear to have no knowledge of. All fun stuff for the British tabloids, which have had a field day. But the one truly disturbing story was in the UK Telegraph this week, with claims that a journalist who was simply questioning Jason Ardai about his claims then received a visit from Scotland Yard, no less. Yep, it's those British thought police at it again, working themselves up into a lather over, you guessed it, racism and racially motivated harassment. And then yesterday came the news, maybe it wasn't racism after all, in what many view as an unravelling of the entire DEI diversity decades. The Cambridge professor quit his job. Meanwhile, also over in Britain came the sad news this week of the abrupt death of my colleague at The Spectator, the brilliant Rod Liddle, who died aged only 66 after a short illness. If you're a regular reader of The Spectator, and you should be, you don't need me to tell you what an amazing writer Rod Liddle was. In my opinion, one of the very, very finest writers in The Spectator's nearly 200-year history, and certainly the reason I got into writing about politics and culture. Rod Liddle, as is such a familiar story, began life as a dedicated leftist, great Labour man, but in the last decade or so was increasingly on the Social Democrat or even the Conservative side of politics. But his venom for the absurdities of the modern woke left inspired many of his greatest columns. Indeed, he had a particular hatred for woke, which he always referred to as another four-letter word beginning in W and ending in K.
All these woke issues, all these identitarian issues are self-contradictory, and you can pull them apart, just by tugging on the thread, and the whole thing falls apart. And the one which is falling apart first is the transgender stuff. Yeah. And I don't think anyone signs. I just don't think anyone signs up to it. The transgender people I know don't sign up to it. No one signs up to that stuff.
I think the culture war is as important, if not more important, than the economic stuff. The culture war is not a war between two equal sides. It's a kind of assault on the country by a small minority, but supported by a liberal elite. Or tacitly supported and sometimes explicitly supported by a liberal elite. And I think that is what the British people really, really don't like at all.
I do think we're at peak wank. I think the wave of wank is sort of tilting over like that.
Rod Liddle. Rod Liddle was well known on British TV for his no-holds-barred approach to politics. Here he is eviscerating former UK Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn.
I really wish that the people who were taken in by that and agreed with that would look to the left away from the podium and see the rabble with their Palestinian flags and their lanyards sponsored by Hamas, would look to the raft of hypocrites, the raft of hypocrites on the Labour front bench, Thornbury, Abbott, Chakrabarti, all of whom don't want you to send your kids to private school or to selective schools, but do so for their kids. And for Corbyn and McDonnell, who have given support and succour to every possible hostile, violent, anti-democratic, terrorist regime or organisation they can.
Jeremy Corbyn, may I remind Australian viewers, is a great mate of Anthony Albanese's. But I digress. Here is Rod Liddle, not batting an eyelid at the typical loathing the modern left always displayed towards him.
You see, the point is, the reason I admire Yasmin is at least she's honest. Unlike you and most of the other liberal, faux liberal left, she
I'm
actually...
faux liberal left,
well,
right.
Of course you are. At least she is absolutely clear about her loathing for the working class. As she says...
I'm clearly honest that I loathe you. I have no words to express how much I loathe you.
Well,
and in that, I feel quite proud that I'm able to tell you that. And we don't kill each other.
I feel warm inside, and I'd like to embrace Yasmin for,
don't.
saying that. I really would.
Please, don't.
Rest in peace, Rod Liddle, one of the greatest writers of our time. Closer to home, I was highly amused this week to see our dear old mate Kevin Rudd, who has gone from being the worst Prime Minister Australia ever had to only being the third worst Prime Minister Australia has ever had, after Malcolm Turnbull snuck in and sneakily stole the coveted second place, took the silver, and of course the gold medal worst Australian Prime Minister of all time will be safe for many years to come in the hands of Anthony Two Melons Albanese. But anyway, here's the former one-time worst Prime Minister Australia ever had, explaining why the very popular Pauline Hanson is unsuitable to be Prime Minister.
The easy business of politics is simply to act as a protest vector and then lace it and spice it with the politics of race. That's what Mrs Hanson's been doing ever since she emerged in my fair state of Queensland a quarter of a century ago. Her script hasn't changed. But ask this question of yourselves. What single answer does she have to any of the list of problems and challenges which I went through before? Zip is the answer to that.
He always cracks me up. I always say, when Kevin Rudd attacks you, you must be doing your job really, really well. Let's just remind ourselves how Kevin Rudd himself mastered those delicate prime ministerial skills back in the beardless days.
Mate, this is just impossible. I get to the very end, it's in the embassy to just give me simple sentences. I mean, I've said this before. And tell that interpreter, this language, he just complicates it so much, you know? How can anyone do this? This is becoming hopeless. Tell them to cancel this meeting at 6 o'clock, will you? I'm going to have patience to do it.
Just cancel that meeting, will you, somebody? I don't have the patience for it. I miss those days. A masterclass of prime ministerial decorum in this mad and crazy world of ours. Thanks, Kev. The horrific case of the Muslim socialists now gaining prominence in US politics, including the comedy show that is Mayor Zoran Mamdani in a tick. Joining me now is political journalist John Fund. John, great to see you. So we've got another Democrat socialist, another far-left Muslim candidate. This bloke's Abdul El Sayed, who has shaken up the Michigan Senate race. And Donald Trump, for one, is not impressed.
A hater of Jews and a hater of Israel. This guy hates Jews. When I watch Abdul, he's full of shit.
Colourful language there. What do you make of this guy? Tell us about him, John.
Well, he's a public health official. By the way, has never practiced as a doctor. So better to call him Professor Abdul. He was the big supporter of the lockdowns in Michigan, which were horrendous. They shut down almost all businesses. You could buy liquor and you could buy marijuana during the lockdown. You couldn't go into a store and buy garden seeds or gardening tools to keep yourself occupied outdoors. It was insane. Now, in addition to that, he is a complete socialist. He may not be a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, but he's certainly adjacent to them. He wants to nationalize health care. He wants to end all military sales, including defensive equipment, to Israel. He is someone who has called in the past for defunding of police, although he's tried to pedal back from that. In other words, he's a mess, and the Democratic establishment has egg all over their face. They spent $70 million to try to stop him. He lost the black vote. He lost the working class vote. He lost the rural white vote. So how did he win by 1 percentage point? He carried college students, the overeducated, and the public employee union members. That's enough in the Democratic Party in a low turnout primary to win. Now I think he's going to go on and be thrashed by the Republican Mike Rogers in the election in November, and good riddance. But unfortunately, his victory is going to embolden other Democrats in other primaries to take on Democrats and probably take them out. The Democratic Party is in danger of being colonized by the Democratic Socialists of America.
And John, you're absolutely right, because we've seen, you know, in New York, the Muslim Democrat Socialist Zoran Mamdani, who's now running the show. He's got his cheap grocery stores and all sorts of things. But I had to laugh, John, at this Seinfeld spoof about Zoran Mamdani. Have a look.
Mayor Mamdani is a complete failure, and his followers are getting so radical.
Tell me about it. I can't even eat a pretzel without a protest breaking out. Don't blame me. I voted for Sliwa.
So, John, you don't need to be a comedian to see the funny side of Mamdani opening a cheap grocery store, for example, and then there were suggestions, oh, he'd be asking people to show ID to get in and this sort of stuff. It does seem to be Seinfeld come true in New York.
Well, Mayor Mamdani, to his credit, is sincere. He is sincerely a radical. He sincerely wants to impoverish New York by driving out business. He's fired his entire business advisory council, presumably because he doesn't think he needs business advice on how to make the city prosperous. He's hired the worst bureaucrat that Joe Biden ever employed, Lena Khan, who was head of the Federal Trade Commission, and he is going to drive as much as possible productive industry out of New York. And you know, he's a walking advertisement for the Florida Department of Relocation and Economic Development.
Maybe Seinfeld will get back together to have a go. They've certainly got plenty of material there. And also, speaking of comedy, John, we had the Anthony Fauci. I played those clips last week about that extraordinary appearance on Capitol Hill where he pled the Fifth 111 times. But now we learn that Congress are taking it seriously. There's a Senate group have voted for this is contempt of Congress. Is there a stint behind bars awaiting Dr. Fauci, in your opinion, John?
No, I think, though, that this will go further, and I think that he will be perhaps fined. Let's be honest. You're not going to put an 85-year-old man behind bars. You're just not going to do that. But I think his reputation is in tatters. I think his place in history has been driven into the basement. And I think we have a lot more to learn. There are a lot of Fauci acolytes out there who are still in the government. I think they should be called and asked, what did you know? When did you know it? When did you stop thinking what you knew? And did you ever tell the American people whom you owed the truth to?
Beautifully put. Thanks so much, John Funn. Thanks for coming on the show and chatting to us. Still to come after the break, I'll chat to the amazing Jonathan Sacerdoti about whether or not the West should be suspicious of Islam. In a tick. Yes, members of the climate cult need to ask themselves whether or not a daily sauna is what they need to prepare themselves for the approaching era of global boiling and catastrophic climate change. At least that's what scientists in Britain are suggesting. They want the POMs to attend heat training in saunas to adjust to the scorching temperatures brought on by, altogether now, climate change. The Daily Mail even provided its readers with a helpful chart showing how long men and women should spend in a steaming sauna, which you can hang on to if you intend preparing for the climate apocalypse with regular extreme heat sessions. Speaking of extremes, back in the 1980s when I used to work in advertising, Shell used to make fantastic ads about their North Sea oil projects, including their amazing oil platforms, such as the one that was called Charlie, which could withstand all the extremes of the North Sea's vile weather to safeguard Britain's energy supplies. Ads like this created by my good friend Gary Horner. Magnificent. Then, of course, like all the rest of the UK's energy suppliers, Shell abandoned that sensible approach and instead decided to go woke and wasted several decades on nonsense like this ad from 2011 spruiking Shell's Energy Summit, complete with, "Oh, look, mummy, a tree," and "Oh, look, mummy, green grass and blue skies," and "Oh, look, mummy, look at those beautiful windmills." Ooh. Over at rival BP, they went so far as to change their name, laughably and idiotically, from British Petroleum to Beyond Petroleum. What a joke. In the first quarter of 2026, BP reported profits of $3.8 billion, largely attributed to its oil trading business. Kel surprise, who'd have guessed? Meanwhile, in Britain last week, 2 outdoor ad campaigns by Shell that promoted the company's climate-friendly products were banned by Britain's Advertising Standards Authority, who ruled that they misled the public by omitting information about the firm's large-scale investments in oil and gas. End of quote. The ads had suggested that a significant proportion of Shell's business comprised lower carbon energy products, when in fact the vast majority of the company's operations still rely on oil and gas. Again, quelle surprise. Anyway, maybe as a result of that fiasco, Shell have finally woken up to themselves and have now ditched their British solar farms, according to the UK Telegraph, as they, quote, retreat from net zero. Great stuff. Meanwhile, here in Australia, where our renewables madness is killing and has killed untold numbers of magnificent bird life in the name of saving the planet, fearless Labor Minister Murray Watt, or Murray Anagram as I call him, has come to the rescue in the nick of time.
We now do have confirmation of the first mass mortality in native wildlife in Australia. This is the beginning of what is likely to be a long, difficult journey in terms of the impacts on wildlife.
Oh, hang on, my mistake. That was Murray Anagram. Sorry, Murray Watt, lamenting the 74 birds that have died because of the H5 bird flu. No such concern for the estimated tens of thousands of birds that have been killed by Labor's insane climate change and renewables energy cult-like obsession. Just last month, the Financial Review reported that one wind farm alone in New South Wales was responsible for killing 20 magnificent wedge-tailed eagles over an 18-month period. Well-respected ecologist Emma Bennett has indicated that turbines yield roughly 4 to 6 bird carcasses per turbine per year. This contributes to an overall death toll that likely tops 10,000 birds annually across Australia, not counting those removed by scavengers. Disgraceful. Meanwhile, over in France, over 400 individuals have so far been arrested in connection with lighting the so-called climate-induced wildfires. Yes, arsonists. Or, as Hergé's famous detectives might have put it, climate schmeimet. Well, I showed earlier Lawrence Fox's superb cartoon stunt at the Oxford Union debate, the proposition of which was the West is right to be suspicious of Islam. The other brilliant and very brave speaker that night was Jonathan Sacerdoti. Here is just a small part of his speech.
I'm here tonight to represent the other side of this debate, Western values. I'm here to talk about how Islam has encroached on our lives. I would love not to be here, especially at this time. I would love never to talk about this topic again, never to talk about Islam. It's not my faith, it's not my ideology. But over and over again, it has confronted me, coming for my life, for your lives. What we have in the West is worth protecting. Our freedoms, our culture, our ethics, this university, this country, all of it. And it can compete, it can win, but only if you stay curious, stay intelligent, stay suspicious, especially of Islam.
I'm delighted to say Jonathan Sacerdoti joins me now. Jonathan, great to see you. Now, despite your and your team's magnificent efforts in the debate, the motion was defeated, which staggered me because that means the brightest minds at Oxford University believe it is wrong to be suspicious of Islam. That staggers me. What does it tell you, Jonathan?
Well, don't worry, because I don't think it does necessarily mean that. You know, it's a good couple of decades plus since I was a student at Oxford University. But I know that the way that particular room works is not necessarily indicative of what the brightest minds of this country think even today. That was a selected audience, and even of the selected audience who had joined the Oxford Union and then who had joined this Oxford Union, which appears to have been captured in many ways ideologically, most of them couldn't get in because the mobs outside and the police actually prevented most of the audience from being able to get in on the evening. So the people in that room who voted didn't really represent, well, anything in particular, just those people in that room. And many of those had got there very, very early because they were really connected with those organising the event who had a particular agenda.
Now, Jonathan, what was the key response, I guess, to your speech, which was quite brilliant, basically saying that suspicion is necessary, and you outlined the many, many ways in which Islam, or extreme Islam, whatever you want to call it, has damaged your life and the lives of many Brits and Australians. What was your, reflecting on it now 6 weeks later, what do you think the debate succeeded in doing?
So the fact that they dragged their feet so long for releasing the video is actually quite interesting because it's really made this whole debate come alive again. And this time it's on the platforms that we really cared about. As I said, very few people managed to make it into the room because of the security constraints. But now millions of people around the world are actually watching this video. And I'm delighted to be on Australian television talking about it to you, because this is a debate that we need to have across the world. And I'll tell you this, if the people in that room didn't vote in our favour, I have received an enormous amount, overwhelming amount of support, emails, messages, tweets, comments online, almost all very much in agreement with what I said. Now, of course, there's an echo chamber effect, but I will say this is an important debate. And the reason that I went along and did it, and as did the others, is because I think we want this to be talked about around the world. And the Oxford Union, for all its faults, still has the power to inject these conversations and debates into day-to-day life for other people. They get noticed. So that is what I tried to do. And as you quite rightly pointed out there, I decided that I wasn't there to talk about Hadith or Quran. That's not my job. I'm a Jew. I'm a Briton. I'm a Westerner. That is for Islam and for Muslims to debate. What I wanted to talk about was how Islam has encroached in the lives of non-Muslims, particularly Westerners in this case, because that was the motion for debate. And one question that I asked in the debate, and it's gone pretty viral online, is what people's first realization or memory of knowing about Islam was in their lives. And the interesting thing that I've noticed from the replies to that online, there have been hundreds, is that really the answer depends on one thing. When the person answering was born. And what is the thing that changes? It is the terror attack that they refer to as their first awareness of Islam. That is how people seem to have first become aware of Islam. So, am I saying that all Muslims are terrorists? Of course I'm not. But what I'm saying is that Islam tends to enter the lives of Westerners, or at least their consciousness, in negative and traumatic ways. We mustn't be afraid to talk about this. We really need to talk about it. Muslims need to talk about it.
And yet we are afraid of it. What is the key area of suspicion in your mind that Westerners need to keep to the forefront when it comes to radical Islam?
Look, I think we should be suspicious of all sorts of things, not just Islam. So I think suspicion is a very natural human instinct. I think it's one of our survival techniques. Suspicion is quite a low bar. So I was very surprised that this was the wording they chose, but I was delighted for it because it's not aggressive, it's not nasty. I don't think that there is a problem in being suspicious of Islam. I'm suspicious of many different political ideologies, and Islam is a political ideology at its core as well as a faith and a religion. It has rules for life. It has rules for people's lives who are not
Muslim. I would say that that is something that we deserve to be suspicious of. And I think we should be suspicious of the extremist parts of Islam and those who carry out extremist interpretations, but also perhaps suspicious of those within Islam who don't necessarily subscribe to those extremist views, but don't do much about it or don't seem in any way able to win out against it. Even the moderate or reforming Muslims that I know, and there are many, and I spend a lot of time talking and researching and speaking with those people, they often seem to be its first victims, because extremist Islam, violent Islam, comes for those people just as much, if not more, than it comes for Jews or Christians or other non-Muslims. So I would say that we need to be deeply suspicious of any force, whether it's a religion or not, that is a sort of totalitarian, conquering, aggressive force, which has a lot to say about even people who aren't adherents to that ideology or faith.
And Jonathan, just quickly before we go, how does the average person, well-meaning person, Jewish, non-Jewish, Australian, Britain, defend themselves or defend Israel against the constant inversion of the truth? We keep getting these lies and this propaganda. One's been debunked today by UNICEF about Gaza kids starving. It turns out they're not starving at all. How does the everyday, well-meaning person protect themselves and defend Israel against these constant inversions of the truth?
For me, it's by sticking to the truth. It's by searching for the truth. It's by pursuing the truth and spreading the truth. And that is to say, if something seems wrong, if something is inaccurate, if you know that it's wrong, speak out against it. Don't be scared. Don't be intimidated to do so because it's unfashionable, or even because you're afraid of what some people might do to you if it goes against what they passionately believe. I think that's the only way that as free, liberal Westerners, we can hope to make this better. And that's what I said on the night. I said, don't be afraid to call out problems that you see with your own eyes because you are somehow afraid of the consequences that might happen to you immediately. I think we should be much more afraid of the consequences of what happened to us collectively if we don't speak out and we don't spread the truth and we don't call out lies and problems and extremism.
Jonathan Sacerdoti, always great to chat to you, and a great job there at the Oxford Union. Thanks so much for staying up and speaking to the world according to Rowan Dean. And after the break, you can take the aeroplane out of Israel, but you can't take the Israeli technology out of the aeroplane. In a tick. And thanks for watching the show. Well, you know I love a good metaphor, and they don't come any better than this one. Wait for it. The Prime Minister of Ireland's new French-made government jet had its Israeli navigation system removed because, you know, boycott Israel, it's the Jews, all that sort of stuff. And now, wait for it, the plane can't land in foggy weather, of which there's quite a bit in Ireland. This is too funny for words, but as a metaphor, how perfect. The left demonises the tiny nation of Israel and the Jewish people who have given the world so much, not only in terms of technology, but also Enlightenment values, philosophy, religion, science, art, literature, culture, medicine, and so much more. Take the Jews out of the West, and you condemn the rest of us to flying blind, just like that Irish jet. That's it from me. I'll see you Sunday morning for a must-watch Outsiders at 9 a.m. But right now, it's Opinionated with Danica DeGiorgia. Good night.